Welcome to APUSH. Today we're going to talk about the development of human sedentary culture. So, over the course of this lesson, hopefully you'll be able to pick up the forces that drove human migration, and you'll be able to explain why sedentary culture developed and be able to distinguish between different styles of agriculture and settlement, noting some characteristics of each. So, let's get going. Early human civilization was defined by migration, as humans moved around in order to follow food supplies. Early humans most likely lived in kinship groups like most other large primates and followed food supplies. These food supplies would often change, and humans would have to adapt as climate and different environmental factors changed. And so a new ice age comes, and all of a sudden, hey, the plants that we used to eat are no longer here. The animals are moving to different areas. It's time for us to move, or we're going to starve to death. So early human life was about adaptation more than anything else. We believe that, although we don't know for sure, the earliest humans started here, sort of in Central Africa, and then over the span of, about 1.6 million years, slowly spread to all the other continents, sans Antarctica, traveling across the land bridge of the Bering Strait during one of the ice ages, or, maybe using boats to go along the coast, or who knows, maybe they came to the Americas some other way. Quite honestly, all of this is guesswork, so we do our best. These early humans were hunters and gatherers. We tend to think of hunting as the most dramatic and exciting part of this. This is why you spend all your time hunting in the game Oregon Trail. But in reality, gathering was probably much more important, accounting for about 80 to 90% of a society's food supplies. Gathering is, of course, you gather up helpful plants in around the area in order to provide food for your civilization. And humans also hunted, developing simple tools in order to catch /spear /hook /club a variety of tasty animals in order to help supplement their mostly plant-based diet. The disadvantage of hunting and gathering, of course, is that the food supplies are not secure, and if the animals move away or the plants die off, you're going to have a hard time finding something to eat. Ironically, the pro side of hunting and gathering is it's believed that people had significantly more free time when they hunted /gathered than in any of the other styles of sort of human civilization. So on the plus side, you have a lot of free time. On the minus side, you might starve to death. Domestication of plants and animals were, of course, a game changer for human civilization. We think that animals were domesticated first, specifically in this part of Anatolia here, moving into the Tigris and Euphrates river valleys, domesticating sheep, pigs, cattle, goats, all the animals that we think of when you think of farm animals today, or most of them, and that the pastoral tribes and peoples would have herds of these animals, which is useful because then you don't have to go hunt a wild animal. You can just go club an animal from your herd. So, ready supply of food. There's a benefit there, clearly. Of course, animals are also very important for doing labor. And so here we see some very two-dimensional cows helping to harvest some grain for the Egyptians. Which brings us, of course, to agriculture. Swidden farming and gathering was probably the first type of agriculture that was developed beyond just, people accidentally dropping seeds and then seeing, oh, look, there are plants there. Swidden farming and gathering is also known as slash and burn agriculture, where you burn and cut down normal plants in an area, and then you plant your crops in that area. And then after harvest, you harvest the crops and then move on to another area to again slash/burn. This has a couple benefits and some obvious drawbacks. The benefits are that because you're not farming in the same area, the nutrients stay in the soil and the soil doesn't get worn out as quickly. So it can be used in a variety of different places without depleting nutrients in the soil. The disadvantage is you constantly have to be moving. So slashing and burning means that it's difficult to stay in one place and develop more complex buildings and things like that because you'll have to be abandoning them at some point in the future. This brings us to intensive agriculture, which is where you're farming intensely in one area for a longer period of time. Because you're farming in one area, you can develop more complex fields, more complex series of terracing and irrigation, and crop yields tend to be higher from intensive agriculture. There's 4 places in the world that we believe intensive agriculture developed at about the same time. You've, of course, got Egypt and the Nile River Valley. These are all river valleys, by the way, because along river valleys, especially these river valleys, you tend to have fairly regular flooding, which then replenishes nutrients in the soil and allows people to stay there without the soil getting worn out. So, as we said, Egypt and the Nile River Valley, Mesopotamia, which you're probably aware of, the Indus Valley Civilization, which you might not be aware of, and then the Yellow River Valley in China. All of these had some similar characteristics and developed some similar traits because of this. Most of these civilizations used some level of irrigation to ensure that their crops and their fields had, had enough water. This, of course, requires significant labor to create and maintain these irrigation trenches and requires more government organization in order to make sure that this is actually happening. Because when you're living in a larger, more complex civilization, you need to absolutely make sure your food supply is there, or else lots of people are going to die. Usually, these civilizations moved in pretty predictable patterns where you start to get farming technology, and then as you get these larger cities, you get a division of labor, you get record keeping in history, more complex religious and cultural institutions, and increasing technology, which then allows you to build even more sophisticated societies. So all of this sort of builds on itself to create what we think of today as human civilization, quote unquote. Historians tend to like this version of civilization, mostly because they write down histories for us to be able to read. And so we focus, as historians and as students of history, on more complex civilizations, generally ignoring smaller villages and hunting and gathering bands, as you'll see through the course of this semester. So, with that in mind, hopefully you'll be able to explain the forces that drove human migration and explain how sedentary culture developed and distinguish between the types of agriculture.